As she turned the corner of 8th and Marshall, she noticed him again, the man sitting by the post office, wrapped in a thin hoodie, a cardboard sign trembling in his hands. It read, "Not asking for money. Just hungry." She'd passed him for 3 days straight. This time, she stopped. She crouched beside him, opened her grocery bag, and pulled out a wrapped sandwich and a banana. "I don't have much either," she said, placing the food in his hands. "But this should get you through the night." The man looked up slowly. His eyes were striking tired, yes, but intelligent. "You have no idea what this means," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She smiled weakly. "We all fall down sometimes." She turned to go. "Wait," he said. "What's your name?" "Lena." He didn't give his. She walked away without asking for anything in return. The next morning, the man was gone. But a week later, Lena's world shifted. It began when she received an envelope at her apartment door. Inside was an invitation, "Private job interview, the Hathaway building. Thursday. 9 a.m, dress formally." She laughed at first. A prank, surely. She didn't apply for anything. But curiosity overruled doubt. She showed up. The receptionist smiled like she'd been expected. Lena was escorted to the top floor, glass walls, white orchids, quiet elegance. The office was empty but warm. Then the man from the street walked in, not in a hoodie, but in a tailored black suit. Her jaw dropped. He didn't smile. Just nodded. "I'm Ethan Wade, CEO of Wade Enterprises." Lena could barely speak. You were on the street." "I know." "Why?" "Because I lost faith in people. I needed to know if kindness still existed when no one was looking." Lena stepped back, unsure whether to feel flattered or betrayed. "So, I was a test?" "No," Ethan said gently. "You were a miracle." He offered her a job, not as a secretary, but as a community project manager. "I want to build something real," he said. "Something that matters. And I want someone by my side who hasn't forgotten how to care." Lena hesitated, heart racing. She had nothing to lose, only the past to escape and a future to consider. She accepted. Weeks turned into months. They worked late together, laughed over coffee, shared stories. Lena taught him how to trust again. Ethan taught her how to dream again. One evening, after a charity event she had planned to perfection, he took her hand under the city lights. "I thought I had everything until I lost everything. But I didn't know what I was truly missing until I met you." Lena looked into his eyes, the same ones that once pleaded for food in the rain, and saw no wealth, no suits, no power. Just a man who had finally come home to his heart. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. "You did everything," he said. "You looked at me like a human being when I didn't even feel like one." He kissed her under the city lights, not like a billionaire, not like a boss, but like a man finally seeing clearly. And she kissed him back, not because he was rich, but because he was real. Sometimes, giving leads to unexpected love. And sometimes, the person you help becomes the reason your life changes forever. She woke up the next morning wondering if it had all been a dream. The kiss. The warmth of his hand. But it wasn't a dream. Because when she checked her phone, there was a message. "Ethan, meet me at the Lakeside Cafe at noon. I want you to see something." Lena stared at it for a long time. This wasn't just business anymore. It hadn't been for a while. But now, it was real. Scary. Beautiful. Unknown. She arrived at the cafe early. It was quiet, tucked near a still lake with glassy water and birds gliding low. Ethan was already there, dressed in a grey sweater and jeans, this time simple, comfortable, human. He stood as she approached, holding a folded document in his hand. "I bought something," he said. Lena blinked. "Another company?" He smiled. "No. A building. Your bakery. Or, well, the one you always talk about when you think I'm not listening." She stared, stunned. "There's a small shop front near your apartment. Corner of Bay and Leicester. Used to be a florist. I bought it for you. Fully renovated. Equipment ready. All it needs is a name and a dream." Lena's hands shook. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan stepped closer. "Because when I had nothing, you gave me something. A sandwich, a look of kindness, a piece of your heart. This is just me giving a piece back." Tears gathered in her eyes. She wasn't used to receiving. "Not like this." "But what if I fail?" she whispered. "Then you fail knowing someone believed in you. And I'll still be here." She looked away, trying to hold herself together. "And if people talk, say I only got this because you." He took her face in his hands. "Then let them talk. I know the truth. You changed me before I ever knew I needed to change." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to fall in love with you." He smiled. "Too late. I fell first." They stayed by the water long after the coffee had gone cold, wrapped in silence and something deeper. Ethan wasn't the billionaire anymore. Not to her. He was the man who saw her. The man she saw even when he had nothing. Months later, the bakery opened. Its name etched in gold across the glass, Second Chances. People came for the pastries. But they stayed for the story. Lena never forgot the rainy day she offered a sandwich. And Ethan never forgot the girl who saw beyond his rags. Sometimes, love doesn't come in grand gestures. It arrives quietly wrapped in kindness, disguised as coincidence, sealed by fate. And just like that, two strangers became everything. No chapters. No breaks. They called her, the girl who softened a billionaire, though she hated the label. Not because it wasn't true, but because it made it sound like magic, like some fairy tale, when in truth, it had been small choices. A sandwich. A smile. Showing up every day even when it hurt. She knew what it had cost her to be kind in a world that rarely was. But Second Chances, her bakery, was more than a shop now. It became a symbol. People came in hoping the warmth of her cinnamon bread or the comfort of her buttery rolls might carry some of the magic they'd heard about. But she always told them, it wasn't magic. It was just humanity. Ethan never returned to the boardroom, not in the way people expected. He kept his shares, his name, but gave the daily grind to those who still believed in skyscrapers. For him, the bakery was enough. It was where he finally felt seen. He washed dishes in the back. Rolled dough. Burned his hand on the oven once and swore like any man would. And when people realized who he was, when the stories spread that he, the once reclusive billionaire, was now baking sweet rolls and sweeping floors, they didn't believe it. But when they came and saw him smile at Lena from across the counter like she was the treasure he'd spent a fortune searching for, they started to understand. And for Lena, it wasn't just love. It was redemption. For all the times she'd been invisible. For the years she worked 2 jobs, paid her mom's medical bills, skipped her own meals so she could make rent. Now, every time someone left her shop a little more hopeful than they entered, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her life had meant something after all. They hosted free baking classes on Sundays for single mothers. Gave leftover bread to the shelters. And once a month, they put out a special seater reserved chair with a sign that read, "For the one who needs a second chance today." Anyone could sit. No questions asked.
The girl looked up, stunned. "Why are you helping me?" Lena smiled. "Because once, someone helped me. And it changed everything. Inside, Ethan watched her through the glass, a dish towel slung over his shoulder. And he smiled, not the smile of a man who had everything, but the smile of a man who had finally found the one thing he'd been missing. Sometimes love doesn't save the world in explosions and headlines. Sometimes it just shows up with food, with shelter, with dignity. And sometimes, the person you rescue ends up being the one who rescues you right back. No fanfare. No dramatic ending. Just a quiet truth. Kindness is louder than money. And love when given freely is the greatest transformation of all. The seasons changed, but the warmth inside second chances never did. Winter brought the scent of nutmeg and vanilla. The bell above the bakery door jingled endlessly as strangers, travelers, and old friends stopped in, many drawn by whispers of a miracle love story baked into every loaf. Some were skeptics. Others were dreamers. But no one ever left untouched. Lena still rose before dawn. Her apron dusted with flour, her hair tied in the same messy bun she'd worn during the hardest years of her life. But now, Ethan would always be there too, mumbling about how early it was, stealing bites of dough, kissing her on the cheek when no one was looking. They didn't need to say, "I love you," every day. It was in the way he poured her tea exactly how she liked it. In the way she reminded him to take breaks when his back ached. In the silence they shared when the day ended, her head on his shoulder, watching the street they once walked as strangers. One snowy night, long after closing, they sat alone in the bakery. No customers, no phones, just them and the hum of the heater. Outside, snow blanketed the sidewalks. Ethan reached into his coat pocket. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Are you pulling out a muffin?" He chuckled and shook his head. "Something sweeter." It was a small velvet box. She froze. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech. He just opened it, revealing a simple silver ring with a tiny, carved wheat symbol, their bakery's emblem. "Will you keep building this life with me?" he asked softly. Lena stared at the ring, then at him. Her throat tightened. "This isn't how fairy tales end." "I don't want an ending," he whispered. "I want a beginning that keeps beginning." She didn't cry. She smiled, a slow, sure, soul-deep smile. "Then let's keep beginning." She slipped the ring on herself. There was no cheering crowd. No camera flash. Just two people in a warm little bakery, sitting beneath a wooden sign that still read second chances, writing a forever that wasn't perfect but real. In time, their story became less about the billionaire and the woman who gave him a sandwich, and more about what they created together. A place. A home. A reminder. That when the world feels cold, it's the warmest hearts, not the richest ones, that truly change lives. Because the truth wasn't in the headlines or fairy tales. The truth was this. A woman saw a man who had nothing and gave him something. He saw a woman who had given everything, and gave her everything in return. And together, they proved. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the start of the greatest love story ever told. Years passed, but their love didn't fade, it settled, the way bread does when it's perfectly risen. No longer loud or rushed, but steady, full, alive in its silence. The bakery grew. They added a second location, then a third. Not because they wanted to build an empire, Ethan had already had one of those, but because they wanted to spread hope. Every new store carried the same name, Second Chances. And everyone had a reserved seat by the window, for the one who needs it most. They never franchised. Never sold out. Lena refused to let it become a brand with empty meaning. Each location was staffed by people who had stories like hers, a single father rebuilding his life, a teenage girl who had aged out of the foster system, a quiet man with a criminal past who had learned how to bake and how to breathe again. These weren't just employees. They were the heart. Ethan became a quiet legend, the billionaire who walked away. Occasionally, newspapers tried to run articles. They declined interviews. Let them wonder, he'd say, sipping coffee beside Lena before dawn. Their life wasn't perfect. The oven broke down mid-holiday rush. Lena had 2 miscarriages. Ethan's past investors sued him once for walking away from a deal. But they stayed together. They faced it like they had faced everything else, from the sidewalk to the soft light of the bakery, with a kind of quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be powerful. One summer afternoon, a young man walked into their first bakery. Nervous, jittery, clothes a little too big, eyes sunken but searching. Lena noticed him immediately. He hovered near the reserved seat. She approached with a warm smile and a basket of rolls. "You can sit," she said softly. "You don't have to explain anything." The boy's voice cracked. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." "You're not just here to eat," she said, placing the basket in front of him. "You're here to begin again." He blinked hard, nodded, and sat. From the back, Ethan watched, gray now in his beard, a little slower on his feet, but his heart stirred the same way it had when he had once sat on a sidewalk holding a cardboard sign. That night, as they closed up, Ethan turned to her under the golden glow of the cafe lights. "You know," he said, brushing flour from her cheek, "we never got a honeymoon." She laughed. "We didn't need one." He tilted his head. "Still, want to take one? Even if it's just a weekend, a cabin, no phones, just you and me and maybe some fresh bread?" She leaned into him, smiling like she always had since the beginning. "As long as there's cinnamon rolls." They kissed in the quiet of their bakery, the same place where everything had begun, where nothing was planned, but everything found its purpose. Because theirs wasn't the story of a rich man who fell for a poor woman. It wasn't a rescue fantasy. It wasn't about wealth, or pity, or image. It was about recognition. 2 souls who had both been overlooked by the world, until they saw each other. Love, in its truest form, not given because someone had value but because they were value. And that kind of love doesn't fade. It just rises. Every day. Like bread. Like hope. Like the promise of second chances. I can help adapt it for your next creative step. They eventually did take that weekend away. It was nothing fancy, a quiet cabin tucked into a hillside, surrounded by pine trees and a sky so open it made Lena feel like she could finally exhale. There was no reception, no noise, no reminders of schedules or flower deliveries. Just her, Ethan, and the sound of wind slipping through the trees like a lullaby. They spent the first day doing nothing. Talking about everything. Watching the fire crackle while she lay on the old plaid couch and he read aloud from a dog-eared book he'd brought. The second night, it rained. Lena stood barefoot on the porch, letting the soft drizzle touch her face, her thoughts wandering back to that day years ago now when she saw him on the street and didn't look away. She felt arms wrapped gently around her from behind. "You always liked the rain," Ethan whispered into her hair. "I think," she said, "because the rain doesn't judge. It just falls. On everyone." He kissed her shoulder and rested his chin there. "You gave me my life back in the rain."
"You gave me mine too," she said, quietly. "You just did it later." That night they made love like it was still their first time, gentle, honest, no performance, no rush. Just skin and soul and silence. In the morning, over black coffee and burnt toast, Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote something for you. Don't read it now. Read it one day when I'm not around." She frowned. "Why? Are you going somewhere?" He smiled, that soft, tired smile of a man who had finally stopped running from himself. "Not today. But one day." Lena held it to her chest. "If you go before me, I'm going to open a 4th bakery and name it after you." He laughed. "Only if it's the worst one." They left the cabin with lighter hearts, more in love than ever. Years passed again. There were wrinkles now. Grey hairs. Slower mornings. But the rhythm of their lives stayed kind. They didn't chase success anymore. They nurtured it in others. And then, one spring, Ethan didn't come downstairs. Lena found him still in bed, eyes closed peacefully, that envelope resting beneath his pillow. The loss split her in a way no one could see from the outside. She worked less, spoke softly. But the warmth inside Second Chances never dimmed, it just shifted. Became deeper. More sacred. Weeks later, when she finally opened the envelope, her hands trembled. It read, "Lena, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But don't let sadness swallow the life we built. I was just a man, angry, broken, rich in all the wrong ways, until you handed me a sandwich in the rain. I never told you this, but I had planned to disappear that night. You stopped me without knowing. You saved me. So every time you serve bread, or help someone start over, or laugh a little louder than usual, know that a part of me is still there. My life began again with you. Love doesn't end, Lena. It just waits for us, somewhere softer. Ethan." She cried that night. Not loud. Just deep. The next morning, she opened the bakery like always. Put on her apron. Lit the oven. Wrote a new message on the chalkboard by the door. Today's special, Second Chances, served warm. And when a stranger walked in with tired eyes and hesitant steps, Lena smiled the same smile she gave Ethan long ago. "Sit wherever you like," she said. "Especially if today, you need a beginning." The bakery never closed. Even after Ethan's passing, even as the world spun forward and cities changed, Second Chances stood like a lighthouse, humble, warm, glowing through the storm of people's lives. Lena aged gracefully. Her movements slowed, but her heart never did. She still remembered customers' names. Still snuck extra cookies to kids when their parents weren't looking. And every time she passed the seat by the window, the one always reserved, she'd smile to herself, remembering a hungry man in the rain who once sat alone with a sign that said, "Just hungry." The young man who once took that same seat on a snowy day now ran the second branch. His name was Darren. He had a tattoo of wheat on his forearm and a fierce loyalty to Lena. "You fed my body," he'd once told her, "but you healed something I didn't even know was broken." He wasn't the only one. A woman escaping an abusive relationship. An old teacher who had lost his job and confidence. A runaway teenager who didn't believe in adults until Lena offered her a quiet job and never asked questions. Each of them became part of the place. Over time, the walls of Second Chances became filled with photos not of celebrities or awards, but of beginnings. First paychecks. First pies. First hugs between strangers. Weddings, even. Babies born after lives were rebuilt. And every year on the anniversary of Ethan's passing, Lena would bake the same cinnamon rolls they used to make together. She wouldn't sell them. She'd give them away. He believed in beginnings, she'd say. This is his way of reminding you it's never too late. One morning, many years later, Lena didn't open the shop. She didn't come down the stairs, didn't turn on the oven. But the staff didn't panic. They simply opened the doors themselves because she had taught them everything. That day, the reserved seat at the window stayed empty, just as it always had, until someone new walked in. A young woman, early 20s, clothes too thin for the weather, clutching a worn notebook. She hovered uncertainly near the counter, but before she could speak, Darren gently guided her toward the window. "You can sit there," he said. "It's for anyone who needs to start over." She looked at him, startled. "But I can't pay." He placed a warm roll in front of her. "It's already paid for." Upstairs, in her final sleep, Lena passed peacefully. They found a letter on her desk, addressed simply, "To the next one." If you're reading this, then the world has found you in a moment of need. You may think you've lost everything. But I promise kindness is never lost. It travels. It echoes. It grows in places you haven't yet seen. Someone once told me love doesn't end. It just waits for us, somewhere softer. May you find it here. Keep baking love. Keep serving hope. And don't forget to leave a seat for the next soul who walks in from the rain. Lena Wade. They didn't hold a grand funeral. Instead, on a sunny spring day, the community held Second Chances Day. All stores shut down normal business. No sales. No prices. Just warmth. Stories. Free bread. Free beginnings. People brought flowers, not for the grave, but for the windowsills of every bakery. And etched into the glass of the original shop, beneath the name Second Chances, a new line was added. Founded on love. Sustained by kindness. For everyone who ever needed one more try. And so the story continues. Not in fairy tales. Not in books. But in every act of kindness passed from one soul to another. Because long ago, a woman gave a sandwich to a stranger in the rain. And that stranger built a legacy not of wealth, but of welcome. No chapters. No ending. Just love. Still rising. Years blurred into memory, but Second Chances never aged. It became a quiet legend. Not the viral kind that explodes on the internet and fades in a week, but the kind whispered between neighbors, written on napkins, etched in the hearts of those who once sat alone and left with hope. The story of Lena and Ethan was no longer just about a billionaire or a bakery. It became a parable passed from mouth to mouth like the scent of warm bread. Some swore it was real. Others said it was too perfect. But all of them felt it. Whenever they stepped into any branch of Second Chances, they could feel it in the air, something healing, something safe.
Even after Lena's passing, the staff never called themselves employees. They were carriers of grace. Each one had their own story. Darren now trained new hires, not in how to bake but how to listen. How to notice when a person asks for coffee, but really needs comfort. How to tell when someone's silence is actually a scream. How to serve kindness with every plate. One evening, decades after it all began, a documentary crew tried to capture the story. They set up cameras, interviewed people, zoomed in on the seat by the window, the framed letter from Lena, the wall of beginnings. But when they asked an old customer, a woman now in her 70s, what Second Chances meant to her, she simply said, "This place reminded me that I was still worthy of being loved." That moment never aired. But it was the truest line spoken. Years later still, the bakery walls had changed. Fresh paint. New tables. Updated menus. But one thing never changed, the seat. Always by the window. Always reserved. Until one final twist in the story arrived like a full circle. A boy, maybe 12 years old, came in with his mother. He was quiet, clutching a journal. His clothes were neat, but his eyes were distant like someone who had seen too much too soon. The staff didn't ask questions. They seated him by the window. He opened his journal and began writing. The staff watched gently from a distance. When he finished, he stood, walked over to the counter, and handed Darren a page. He didn't say a word. Just smiled and left with his mother. Later, when Darren unfolded the paper, it read, "My mom says this place saved her when I was still in her belly. She said a lady named Lena helped her believe again. I'm gonna write stories when I grow up. Stories about people who don't give up. This place is the first chapter. Thank you for giving us a second chance. J." Darren framed the letter and placed it above the seat. Right below Lena's. Right beside Ethan's. And so, the story never ended. It lived in every word written, every roll baked, every stranger who walked in from the rain and left his family. Because love, once planted, grows roots deeper than time. And a single act of kindness can become 1,000 beginnings. No ending. No final page. Just a table by the window, waiting for the next soul to be seen.